Welcome to the video for chapters 13 and 14. In this final video, we're going to be covering students that are classified as having very low incidence disabilities. This includes students with multiple severe disabilities, students with deafblindness, and students with traumatic brain injury. I've had a lot of experience working with this population, and when I had some free time, I spent it at camp. But I want to show you a couple of my students from the past. This is Maureen. Maureen was a student of mine when I student taught. She absolutely would not listen to one thing I ever told her. When I was doing my student teaching at Mentor City Schools, she was probably my toughest case. I wasn't her teacher. She constantly would just tell me no, get out of her face. And I thought, how could I ever reach this girl? Well, not too long after that, I student taught in the spring. The following summer, I volunteered at a camp. Actually was a camp counselor. I worked there for an entire week. It was an overnight camp. It's Camp Sue Osborne. And this is some of the activities we did there. Got a lot of experience working with kids, teaching them self-care skills, working with them on a number of different projects during the week. We had a great time. I was also responsible for most of my students' independent care techniques, brushing teeth, showering them. It was a huge eye-opener, one of the best things I ever did in education. And give me a break. Like they have to go take them on a, a hayride. First of all, hay rides in July are horrible, and all of my students were just itchy. Not a good idea. But we had a blast. And let's see, where was I going to show ya? Okay, here's Maureen at camp. I love her shirt. It's the whatever shirt, because that's what she said constantly. Now here, a totally different environment. Maureen was 100% on my hip. She wouldn't do anything without me being there. I was constantly being paged that I needed to come and help calm her down. So like I said, and there's a whatever shirt again. So it's important for you to remember context will have a lot to do. Once you build a relationship with these students, it's going to be totally beneficial. And remember, settings can have a major influence. Once Maureen was comfortable with me, I became a primary service provider to her. And on that, I cannot say enough about how much fun that week was and how exhausting it was. So anytime you get an opportunity to spend time with the population of students you intend to serve, the better you're going to be as an educator for them. Spend time with kids. You're not teaching curriculum, you're teaching children. All right, when it comes to characteristics of students with multiple severe disabilities, these students are going to have problems transferring or generalizing information from one situation to another. They may have limited communication abilities, difficulties with memory, and they're going to need those intensive supports for many of life's activities. They're going to need services from many related service providers, like some of the ones we already talked about, like a physical therapist, occupational therapist, speech therapy. So how prevalent is this? Not very prevalent at all. Far less than 1% of American students ages 6 to 21 have multiple disabilities. And let's just face it, the requirements are going to be different for each state. Some states do not include learning disabilities or hearing impairments in this category, but all students are served in ways that are going to be able to meet their unique needs. This population of students they're going to need a lot of functional skills to get them ready for the world we want them to live in. So what are some of the causes and ways we can prevent this category of disability? Well, primary causes look at heredity, problems during pregnancy, problems during birth or incidents right after birth, low birth weight, and once again, a lot of unknown factors can contribute to this. So how can we prevent the occurrence of students with multiple severe disabilities? Well, in the prevention category, we're looking at pre-pregnancy determination of risk factors, looking at good prenatal care, making sure these students have access to health care, and public awareness of prevention strategies. And we always have to go back to IDEA, of course. How do they define multiple severe disability? They look at this as a separate special education category. The term developmental disabilities is often used, and it's often interchangeable when we start talking about students with multiple severe disabilities. It's defined as multiple severe disabilities that combine intellectual and physical problems, and that's going to have a significant impact on the child's ability to learn. So we're going to have to take different approaches working with this population. Let's talk about the first category mentioned in your text. It's called deafblindness. And deafblindness has been a separate category since 1969. Many of these students have other disabilities besides visual and hearing problems. But as you can see, 21% have low vision, 24% are legally blind. The majority have some residual hearing or low vision, but almost half have enough residual vision to allow them to read in large print. Remember how those are defined from our previous chapters. But almost 30% of this population get their education in separate special education classes, with only 7% actually attending general education. So these students have a much more restricted learning environment. Let's check out a program that serves students with deafblindness.
Deafblindness is such a small community, and many people are ignorant to it, including me when he was diagnosed. You know, everybody kind of assumes that deafblindness means full deaf, full blind. So when you bring that federal definition into an IEP and everybody listens to that federal definition, then I think they begin to understand.
Because I never at the time looked at Jake, thought of Jake as being deafblind. And then because he could see and he could hear, although they weren't perfect or what they would consider normal, I just never looked at him. And then when somebody said, suggested that we register him, I was like, well, he can see, and he can hear. But then they were kind of explained to me that with any combination of a deficit, he would definitely qualify and be diagnosed as deafblind. So that's when we registered him with our Ohio Deafblind project.
I actually became associated with the term deafblind when I came to do the assessment for my son when he was about 9 months old, and it was a little bit shocking because I know my son sees, and I know he has moderate hearing loss in his right ear, but the term deafblind itself I couldn't come to terms with.
I always knew, Philip was adopted, but I knew Philip was deafblind, but I didn't know exactly what that meant. So it wasn't a surprise to me. With Philip, the deafblindness was just on top of an additional maybe 7 other diagnoses. So I did not understand, nor did I anticipate what unique challenges the deafblindness presented and how it impacted everything else, even with the other diagnoses. So I can't say that I was surprised, but totally ignorant as to what it meant and the implications. Then once I got with the Deafblind Project, it was like God sent for us. The education was there, the resources were there, help with the IEPs were there, just even people in the area. With us at first, we were a bubble with Philip. I never met another kid like Philip. It's like, kids like Philip, But when we got exposure to the Deafblind Project, we also got exposure to the families. And they have just been wonderful. They have been my best teachers. We go to the conferences and somebody finds out about this, and we have this, like, everybody shares. things from medical to educational, just what's available, what's out there, passing equipment around to each other. It's been awesome. The networking has just been phenomenal.
All right, I hope you found that video helpful, but let's start looking at some characteristics of students that are categorized as being deaf and blind. These students have restricted vision and hearing, and the degree and the amount of vision and hearing loss is not uniform. It's going to be a wide range of different abilities. Each individual is going to be affected differently depending on how severely each one of those disabilities impacts their vision or hearing. At least 60% of students have one physical disability also, in addition to being deaf and blind. So there are multiple disabilities going on here. Cognitive disabilities are also a common problem. Common problems in these areas also include feelings of isolation, issues related to communication, and other issues related to mobility. So what are the causes and prevalence and prevention? The National Deaf-Blind Census reports just about 8,000 students have been identified with this disability between the ages of 6 and 21. The U.S. Department of Education reported almost 1,500 the same year. There's a huge discrepancy, don't you think? And this discrepancy is due to the reporting criteria that's being used. However, if you have these students in your school, in your classroom, it's going to be important for you to work with other professionals to assist them in reaching their educational goals. Some of the causes that are related to this disability category are prematurity, issues related to heredity, and other risk factors associated with poverty and limited access to health care. As far as prevention goes, risk factors can be reduced with systematic prevention programs that are run nationwide. Getting the information out to expectant mothers, getting to intervene early is going to be the key with this population. Let's talk about another disability category under this umbrella. This is called TBI, or traumatic brain injury. And I've worked with a number of students that had this diagnosis. They were injured, well, the two students I worked with the longest were injured in 7th or 8th grade, and I ended up serving them in a high school setting. Before 1975, these students were served under the learning disabilities category. But in 1990, Congress decided it was time to add this to the special education category. At the same time, this is also when autism was added. It's estimated that every one of you are going to come in contact with a student with TBI. So you got to be prepared. Medical advances have been happening since the 60s. So we're saving more children's lives. However, the result of the trauma results in an injury that's going to take some additional educational intervention. And the staggering statistic, over 1 million children annually experience a head injury. And of that, 30,000 of them result in lifelong disabilities. So it's going to be important for you to work with these children. There's a lot of prevention methods out there. How is it defined under IDEA? This is an acquired injury to the brain. It adversely is going to affect educational performance. One of the students I worked with had no short-term memory, meaning that he was not able to take information such as my name and remember it from one day to the next. It took almost a half a year for him to actually remember who I was. And it took a lot of retraining, a lot of memory interventions. You're going to see a video here in a moment. It refers to either an open or closed head injury. And it doesn't include brain injuries that happened at birth. These are things that happened after far after, results of accidents. And the range of this can be very mild to extremely severe. It's not immediately recognized or diagnosed in many cases, as you will see. Let's check out this video where you can learn a little bit more about what a traumatic brain injury is and some of the things you can do to help students in your classroom.
TBI stands for traumatic brain injury. The majority of those injuries are caused where the brain is shifted very quickly forward, backward, to the side.
It could be a simple accident, a sports-related injury.
Being shaken like a shaken baby. It can occur from a fall.
A lot of things happen on a brain injury. They can be very trivial or minor, or could be very serious. When there is an accident, an impact, the brain hits inside, moves inside this hard shell.
So when you're falling, when you are in a car accident or falling off your skateboard, it can tear the brain. And not only can it tear it, it can bruise it, and that bruise can be permanent.
The brain responds by causing a paralysis, the same thing that you would have a chest pain when you have heart attack. When you have a brain attack, you will have problems expressing yourself, understanding, swallowing, moving an arm, moving a leg, walking, thinking, behaving, because the brain controls everything.
The most common problems, whether it's a mild, moderate, or severe brain injury, is still the same. It's cognitive and behavioral.
The severe brain injuries are the persons who require total care. Those are the ones that we lost.
The mild brain injury is, without question, the most underestimated injury, probably in all of medicine. They got their bell rung. That's a brain injury. That's a concussion.
And close your eyes. And it's typical that they don't go to see the doctor until later on, hours or the next day, when they have a headache or they have difficulty coming out with the words. And that means that some blood vessel bursts and there is a blood clot that is really pressing on the brain, and the brain is telling you do something.
This could be a potential time bomb where a second injury, even less severe than the first injury, can cause much more damage.
People have to understand that the reason why they call it silent epidemic is because you can have an injury to the brain that is not visible to anybody's eyes.
As a mom, I think all of the dreams that you have for your kid, will he get married, will he have kids, you know, they've all changed. I was bowling and Josh came out of the bar about 9:30 that night and, you know, was talking to me. He was obviously drunk.
And she said, "You're not driving, are you?" And I said, "Mom, my car's not even here." And she's like, "Oh, okay."
About an hour later, when I got done bowling, I went in to see if he'd come home with me, and they were gone. I knew he was gonna live after like 3 weeks. They did the brain first. And he lived through that. They did the heart. He lived through that. And then it was just a waiting game, a daily battle of, you know, trying to keep him alive.
You know, I woke up from a coma, and I don't remember really much of the first year. When I came home from the hospital, you know, my mom and dad had rearranged their family room and have a hospital bed put in the family room. And, you know, I couldn't do anything on my own. I was totally out of it and in my own little world and incoherent of really anything that was going on around me.
Okay, that's good.
All of Josh's problems are from his brain injury. His bones healed, his heart healed, everything that Every problem that Josh has is because of his brain being injured.
I've been fighting for, 8 years just to get my act together, and, and I know that I have very much so surpassed any of the odds and probabilities that I was given for the first year after I got hurt. As a result of my injury, though, I just can't get my left arm and leg to work the way I want it to, and it's frustrating, frustrating, frustrating. You're welcome. Oh, such a beautiful car.
Because I spend a lot of time at the high school, I've, football games. I do concessions for the football games, and you see a kid, get hurt and they go back in and play, and I'm like, nobody takes it seriously. They just, they don't think about what's happening to the brain.
I never wore, a helmet when I was riding a bike or skateboard, and I can tell you why. You know why? Because this was never gonna happen to me.
I see little kids without helmets on, and I think, parents, what are you doing? Meet my son Josh. That's what I want to say to him.
When my mom and I are in speaking of the driver's ed classes in high schools about drinking and driving, I can see the punk kids that are sitting there just like I would have been 15 years ago, thinking, man, screw you, it ain't gonna happen to me, it'll never happen to me.
It changed our whole routine then, and from then on. My son Jake was looking at colleges, and he changed his whole life plan. My son Doug, I think to this day he's still angry. Josh's sister, she lost her mom. I mean, my life was taking care of Josh. You think you're gonna make these decisions and they're only gonna affect you, and they don't. They affect everybody that you know.
Before I got hurt, I could go anywhere, and I had friends everywhere I went. Now I don't really have, my best friend is my mom, and she's stepped up to the plate that night, and she's been there every step of the way for me. I'm almost 30 years old, and my mother is my best friend. How cool is that, guys? It happened, and I gotta deal with it, and I will be different forever.
All right, I hope you found that video helpful, but let's look at some of the characteristics mentioned in the video and ones that are in your textbook. Students with traumatic brain injury may have seizures. My students had headaches very, very often. It could result in a hearing loss. Reduced stamina. My students were extremely exhausted near the end of the day. One of them just could sweat through a t-shirt in like 5 minutes. It's very tough regulating the body temperature. My students also had vision problems. Their abilities tended to be uneven, meaning they had highly developed skills in one area, and another area they lost them due to the brain injury they suffered. Behavior problems and reduced self-esteem are going to show up, and sometimes, but not always, this can turn into a long-term disability. This might not be something where the students ever fully recover. So it's going to be important. We talk about things like keeping our students safe. As much as I joke around about, kids looking kind of nerdy wearing bike helmets, they are probably the best idea we have. Making kids wear their seatbelts, keeping them protected, because these head injuries can have extremely, extremely long-lasting effects and will definitely impede their quality of life. So how prevalent is this among our students? Like you said, every one of you are going to have a student with traumatic brain injury in your class during your career. How prevalent is it? 23,000 students, or even more than that, were classified as having a traumatic brain injury in 2008. These numbers don't really change. This is pretty standard. What are the causes? Car accidents, bike accidents, issues with sports. What would be the #1 head injury for sports? I know you're thinking football, but believe it or not, it's soccer. Well, I know other Europeans call it football, but it's the heading exercises. It's, they don't wear as much equipment, so it's going to be important to keep your children safe. Falls on the playground or for child abuse. This is where shaken baby syndrome comes in. High-risk behaviors can often result in a traumatic brain injury. Who do you think is the most prevalent in this area? Is it males or females? Yep, males again, and teenage males are most likely to suffer this injury due to more, I would call it, increase in sports participation. We're looking at skateboarding accidents, bicycle accidents, things like that. And hopefully they're not imitating the things they see on Jackass. I don't even know if that's a program anymore, but it was. My students loved it. What are some common sense prevention measures? Wearing helmets. Oh, here's a good one. Don't drive while intoxicated. If you needed to take my class to learn that, make sure you underline it, circle it. Do not drive while you're intoxicated. Avoid high-risk behaviors. That could be, if you watch Tosh.0, you can get a whole bunch of good high-risk behaviors there. If there is a head injury, get prompt and immediate medical attention, and teach your students how to better protect themselves, doing bike safety lessons during Science Week, talking to them about, now I see kids in my neighborhood, they're riding their bikes at the same time. They also have their headphones on their iPods. The more they're alert, the safer they're going to be. So teach them those critical safety skills whenever you can. Okay, let's look at some educational considerations for students with low incidence disabilities. When it comes to assessment, most of these students are going to be identified before they reach kindergarten or first grade. Participation in schools' accountability systems are mandatory for these students also. Even though many of them may have accommodations or modifications, the ones that cannot take the standardized tests using those, take what's called an alternative assessment. We'll talk about that in a minute. Under early identification, these students will have individualized family service plans, and families receive assistance in helping them to interact with their child through these plans. When it comes to pre-referral strategies, students with TBI who are identified later, school personnel can play a critical role in bringing important services into play. You're going to need to know the services in your area that can better provide services for students with traumatic brain injury. Additional identification also takes place during infant screening, but TBI often goes unseen. School professionals can assist with this identification. In your text, look for those signs. Look for any type of issues that might happen if students are starting to complain of headaches, vision problems, problems concentrating. This could be a direct result of a child having an injury on a playground. This is where you're going to have to be really proactive in your classroom. If you didn't see what happened on the playground, just be a little bit more observant, especially if you heard there was an accident. I've seen kids bump their heads, run into walls, all kinds of things. It's going to be important for you as an educator to make sure kids are okay. Talk to them about it. Report this information to the parents so everybody knows if there's an injury, what happened. Get the school nurse on board. Let's talk about alternate assessment for a minute. IDEA requires that all students be included in our national accountability system. However, there's a limited number of students with multiple disabilities at each school that may participate in what's called an alternate assessment. You might hear these called the 1% kids, because the government allows us to only alternately assess 1% of our student population. In order to receive credit for proficient scores on alternate assessment, this cannot exceed 1% of the student population. However, approximately 9% of students with disabilities are assessed this way. If they're not participating in the general ed curriculum, they should be taking assessments that are alternate, that are designed around their specific goals. What's this format look like? Love to tell you, but every single year I've been in education, this process has changed. And I don't mean changed a little, I mean like changed a lot. Some schools use binders, some have a box of materials that are sent, but there will be training in your district if you're going to be implementing alternate assessment for your students. So like I said, the format changes from year to year. They focus on a narrow range of topics and fewer objectives, And these questions may be less complex, and they may also be functionally based, looking to see how independent these students are becoming. When it comes to early intervention, high quality early intervention and preschool education can make up tremendously in terms of positive outcomes for our students. It can reduce the number of intensities of supports needed as an adult. It can help our students attain independence, give them a level of community presence, and increase their quality of life. And that's the main goal I focus on when I work with students with disabilities. Are they getting out in the community? Are they making friends? Are they becoming more independent and having a fuller life? That's what it's all about. So when we look at outcomes for early intervention, for families participating in these types of services, they get to understand their child's strengths, abilities, and their special needs. They get to know their rights and know how to advocate effectively for their children. They're also going to learn how to help their child develop and learn through their teachings. They have stronger support systems, and they access services and community programs in their neighborhoods, which is going to be critical for reaching the level of independence these families desire. Let's check out one of those early intervention programs.
For more than 30 years, the Licking County Board of Developmental Disabilities has provided early intervention services to families and children from birth to age 3. We are committed to providing services based on reliable research that will promote the growth and development of infants and toddlers by supporting and strengthening families. We know children learn every day, all day long. We help families to identify learning opportunities within the child's everyday routines. Our EI team focuses on teaching parents how to best help their child develop. In return, the parents teach us about their child. Our early intervention staff works with parents and families to promote their child's development and participation in everyday activities that are important to them. Our goal is for children to be ready to learn and reach their potential.
All right, I hope you learned a little bit about early intervention services from that video, but let's now move into talking about teaching students with low incidence disabilities. When it comes to the access to the general curriculum, many students with low incidence disabilities do not have access to this. Students with traumatic brain injuries have the highest access currently. And the reasons for these low participation rates, it's not that we don't want those students in general ed, but they're going to require more intensive individualized instruction. Their IEP goals are going to focus on adult independence, and students participate in more of a functional curriculum, teaching them shopping skills, teaching them self-care skills, cooking skills, things so they can be as independent as possible. When it comes to instructional accommodations, each student's going to require a different form of assistance. This might require simple adjustments and modifications to allow the student to gain access. Here's an example for a student with TBI who may only spend a half a day at school and might benefit from that because, once again, that reduced stamina. If you structure the day so important tasks can happen in the morning, then in the afternoon, the student can go out into the community. That's the key. Making sure you're teaching the students when they're ready. Remember, it's their classroom. As much as you want to believe it's yours, it's the students, and it's adjusting to their needs. As far as database practices go, a functional curriculum has been shown to be very, very beneficial for this population. Providing instruction in natural settings, taking them to the grocery store, taking them into the community, and having them practice these critical life skills. These have a direct relationship to the person's daily needs. I did a lot of work with teaching self-care skills to my students at the high school level. It's not going to be appropriate for every student, but we're also looking at vocational and life skills instruction. Labor laws allow students to begin exploring work after age 14. Can't stress this enough. Getting them out there, getting them employed is going to build their self-esteem, increase their self-worth, and help them begin to problem solve and become an independent individual. So the more you can do in that area, the better. When it comes to technology, I've talked a lot this semester regarding applications for communication devices to teach a number of different critical skills. However, for this population, technology can help them communicate more effectively, increase their level of independence, have greater mobility within the community, have greater control over their environments, and gain access to critical information they're going to need. Remember to check out my LiveBinder site. I will constantly be updating it with apps and technology for use with students with disabilities. That includes functional skills, English and language arts, and mathematics. Check out that LiveBinder site. When it comes to augmentative communication, I've already shown you some of the communication boards, speech synthesizers, sign language, communication books. All of this can be incredibly powerful to help students learn to communicate and express their wants and needs. So I'm not going to go over those again, but keep those in mind. They would also work for this population. When it comes to transition through adulthood, students with low incidence disabilities are able to stay through school to age 21, or if they turn 22 during that school year, they're allowed to finish it out. After school, many students receive supported living arrangements and support and wraparound services for employment. However, as students get older, they receive more community-based instruction to foster learning from one setting to another, to increase that generalization. Your text talks about transitions starting at age 16. In Ohio, this starts at age 14. We want to get students prepared to make that move from the middle school to the high school and get them prepared for adult life. When it comes to collaboration for this population, students with low incidence disabilities and their families are going to interact with many professionals from many different disciplines. They're going to become experts in the medical community. These teams should be brought together to orchestrate the needs of each student. You're going to need to communicate effectively if you have students in your class that are using an occupational therapist, a physical therapist, speech therapist. When this happens, the overall results are much more positive because everybody on the team is working on the same goals. Your text talks about an intervener. What that really is a paraprofessional that may provide instruction and help facilitate learning for students with deafblindness, for students with traumatic brain injury. Some of these students may require a one-on-one classroom aide or paraprofessional. So make sure you check that out in Chapter 13. Learn all you can about paraprofessionals. They could be one of your most powerful allies in the school system. When it comes to families for this population, educators need to focus on the family's concerns, and they're going to have a lot of them. Helping them meet the family's needs, helping them increase their capacity to help assist their son or daughter, and also helping them learn to provide support to their child. The key concepts in creating a family support include being the primary unit of concern, remain active in the community, help them assist and gain access to support systems, help them be empowered to deal with the complexity of social service agencies. That's one of the most powerful things you can do. If you're going into special education, one of the best things you can do once you secure yourself a job is get out there and start looking at all the community services that are available. You should be an expert in knowing where families can go to get the supports or the information they need to help their child. And we want these families to receive services which are sensitive to their cultural diversity, making sure you understand that some families are not going to be as open as others to talk about a child's disability, to talk about issues related to how they raise their child. So make sure you have a culturally sensitive understanding of the community in which you teach. Okay, that wraps up Chapter 13. We're going to move on to Chapter 14, which focuses on students that are gifted or talented. Unfortunately, these programs have been cut drastically across the nation. However, if you have these students in your classroom, it's going to be important for you to provide educational interventions that are going to keep them challenged as well. As far as Terman's definition goes, only those scoring in the highest percent on an IQ test are considered gifted. Marlin's definition is used for most of the state's ways of identifying students that are gifted or talented, and it includes high performances in any of the areas such as intelligence, academic aptitude, creativity, leadership, talent in visual or performing arts. And this is an IQ score that's 2 standard deviations above the mean. We're looking at 140 and above. What I do want you to be familiar with is Gardner's multiple intelligence theory. I've actually got a chance to see and meet Howard Gardner before. Extremely interesting individual. He looks at intelligence being multidimensional. And there's 8, that's right, I said it again, 8 dimensions, including linguistic, logical, mathematical, spatial, body kinesthetic, musical, interpersonal, and natural skills. Looking at intelligence from multiple perspectives. Your text talks a little bit about the gifted continuum, and seeing talent development is a new perspective for the field, and it's intended to shift the focus off of a sole academic and intellectual achievement to all areas of human creativity and human endeavors. There are talents that can't be measured by a piece of paper. So when we talk about multiple intelligences, it's going to be important for you to, if you see talent in your students, to help them develop that talent, help them learn to grow as an individual. So what are some of the characteristics you might see if you have a student that's gifted in your classroom? These students are able to reason abstractly. They're able to conceptualize and synthesize information. They're able to manage and process information quickly and meaningfully. They learn very fast, and they show intellectual curiosity. These are things we want to make sure they are encouraged and reinforced within your classroom. These students may also have a wide variety of interests. They're absolutely going to hate and very much dislike drill and routine. They want to think abstractly. They want to problem solve. They will display a high level of verbal ability. They'll prefer a quiet learning environment versus a chaotic, public school. And they're going to be very sensitive to themselves and others. They're very intuitive. So these are some of the characteristics you might encounter. Some other characteristics your text talked about: sensitivity. They might even be perfectionists and may seem very, very intense. Within this category, we look at subgroups, and they have their own characteristics for special services to make sure they achieve their potential. The subgroups that they're concerned about and mentioned in your text are females that are gifted, students from culturally or linguistically diverse backgrounds that are also gifted, and this can include students with disabilities and students with ADHD. These are very powerful subgroups that are going to have, like I said, it could be multiple things going on. Even though they have an attention deficit or hyperactivity disorder, they also might have an extremely high IQ and be extremely intelligent. So different services are going to be required for intervention with this population. How prevalent is this? Since gifted education is not mandated by IDEA, statistics aren't kept. The number of students who would qualify depends on the concept or definition that the state uses to determine giftedness. In the United States, they estimate this to be around 7% of all students are technically identified as gifted or talented. Just like the rest of the text, we have causes and prevention. I don't know if we really want to prevent students from being gifted, but when we look at the causes, both environment and heredity play an important role in the development of a child's intellect. Many factors can help improve outcomes, such as attitude, keeping expectations high, and values supported in the community. These are influenced by culture, they're influenced by our society, they're influenced by social economic issues, and they're going to be influenced by families. So it's important, if children show talent or giftedness, to make sure it's nurtured, to make sure it's encouraged to grow. Like I said, we're not trying to prevent giftedness, but both giftedness and creativity can be inhibited if the school environment isn't welcoming, isn't challenging. Teachers often overlook students that are artistic or creative when determining giftedness. I think the ability to draw, the ability to paint, to create and sculpt, it's something I've never been able to do, and I am constantly in awe. I think that takes a whole nother level of intelligence, of spatial relations, creativity. That's a definite talent that needs to be encouraged. Peer groups can often be critical, especially if a child's doing something that's not according to their norms. If a child's being independent and having an imaginative behavior, this might not be encouraged by peer groups. So it's going to be important for you to support or help put together peer groups where students can be themselves, can be independent, and use their imagination to create and work on projects of their interest. So when it comes to assessments are the gatekeepers to gifted education. In early identification, gifted children express their uniqueness almost from birth. Developmental markers come sooner than we see in typical children. And when we look at when those markers are shown, pre-referral strategies are implemented. Usually teachers begin the process and make an initial referral when they see these students in their classroom. So for those of you who are going to be working with kindergarten through first grade, you might be one of the first people to identify that, hey, this student has a gift, a knack for intellectual education, has a knack for cognition, has a level of talent that far exceeds their same age peers. When it comes to the assessment to identify students that are gifted, multiple assessments may include, but are not limited to, portfolios, IQ tests, and teacher referrals. Remember, many children from diverse backgrounds are excluded by only using IQ scores. As teachers, you should be looking for curiosity, rapid rates of development, a child with an extensive vocabulary, students that are highly motivated or inquisitive, students that are observant, creative, thoughtful, or have any of these innovative traits. So it's going to be important for you to document this, document your observations of students that are displaying any of these characteristics. When it comes to early intervention, preschool programs are critical for all children. However, when it comes to gifted preschoolers, they're going to possess a higher level of curiosity, concentration, memory, and have a more developed sense of humor. You may be able to differentiate your curriculum by modifying the child's curriculum content, restructuring the learning environment, and restructuring your educational approach that's provided to the student to help them remain that curious child, to help them keep them motivated. Because if those concepts aren't encouraged, they might extinguish themselves, and that's going to be bad. It might also cause behavior problems. We're going to look at a gifted program in a moment, but some of the key features of a good gifted program have encouraged students for cognitive processing, encourage abstract thinking, reasoning, creative problem solving, self-monitoring, content mastery, and going into a deeper breadth and depth of a topic. They may also encourage independent study, encourage talent development, and problem-based learning. Let's take a look at one program and check out their approach.
Chemistry,
theater, geography, physics class,
poetry,
Shakespeare, forensics,
learning about learning,
psychology,
a Spanish class,
genetics, acting class, math class, Chinese, writing,
Bill of Rights,
ancient civilizations,
musical troupe,
architecture.
I was in our first year of campers in 1982. Now it's 25 years and it's really grown, really touched a lot of kids' lives. When you're here with a lot of other interesting kids and they're all interested, you almost feel like you can be yourself for the first time. So, you know, what I see these kids doing, and they may be from different states, but they get to know each other and they connect. I still remember a lot of the campers when I was 12. I still something I still keep in touch with.
All of these subject matters, they'll teach you at school, but we don't really have an opportunity to actually delve into the depths of the subject matter.
You get to learn with people that share the same interests as you.
You learn that you don't have to act like you're not smart, because these people don't care if you're nerdy or if you're geeky or if you have something wrong with you or anything. You just get to be yourself no matter what.
We kind of connect because we think similar and we get to know each other really well.
At my school, there are a lot of different people, but here there are more people that are like me.
You're with students that want to learn just as much as you do, and it makes the experience so much better, because you come and there's people not acting up in the class and you get to learn as much as possible.
It seems like at school I'm different than everyone else, and here it seems like you're part of a larger group.
It's just really great to see, all different kinds of people. It's very diverse.
I came back because the environment is just wonderful. There's so many cool people here, and the classes are so interesting.
They're all like really good teachers. You can tell that they really care about what they're teaching and the kids that they're teaching to.
There's a lot of hands-on things, and since the classes are small, we get to interact with each other more and the teacher.
It's a really relaxed environment. Like, you work at your own pace, and you just tell them when you're ready for a test, and you learn how to pace yourself and divide your time into learning what you need to know.
Before I came to Vampy, I kind of just studied for maybe half an hour to an hour for a test, but here it actually teaches you to give more time to your studies. Even if you're a straight A student, it can teach you to get even higher.
And the counselors are great. They strive to make your time the best it can be here.
The support system here is amazing. We have so many traditions.
I really like doing the optionals. Some people call it mandatory fun. There's like some sports stuff if you're sportive. There's some creative stuff for like art. And then there's something called Map Time USA, which I heard that was fun.
The activities after we got through with classes like bowling, swimming, the talent show, a dance, a banquet. I think the most important thing that I'll take away from this experience is having a network of friends who support me in our intellectual pursuit and our education.
The highlight of this summer has definitely been coming back and seeing my friends that I've made over the years.
I actually had 6 people from my city come, and I haven't spent more than about 15-20 minutes with them a day.
Coming to Vampy has really opened me up, and that I can share my ideas without being afraid of what others think about me.
I met actually kids from China and Indonesia. I've learned some of their customs, some of their traditions. We just talk over lunch and stuff.
The people I've met here have all been gifted as well, so they're a lot more accepting of being smart or of being different than the normal.
I learned that I can learn new things as well as anyone else can.
I've actually gained a lot of confidence. My first year, I was a timid, shy, hide in the corner with a book girl, and now I'm one of the people dragging people out of their rooms to get them to join in.
I've learned that it's okay to be smart and that you don't have to dumb yourself down for people, and that they're smart people who are also fun and entertaining as well.
I've learned that I can be independent and live kind of on my own for 2 weeks without my parents.
Learning how to be independent. Like, I have to do my own laundry. I mean, come on.
It's being away from your parents and, getting sort of that freedom, but also, getting just to walk to class and feel like, oh, I'm a big kid now, so.
Well, it helps you learn to break the ice with new people, to get to know new people, and you learn new ways to talk, start conversations, just social skills.
I think it'll help me in college because I've gotten experiences with college teachers and college-level coursework and living in a dorm. I mean, because that can be a really tough experience going away from your home for the first time.
I enjoyed getting away from home for a couple of weeks. I enjoyed learning new things in a different way.
It's been 6 months after Vampy, thinking about it, and the next 6 months just looking forward to it.
This is really something that I've looked forward to ever since the first year I went in 6th grade.
It's a whole lot of fun, too. It's not just going to class hour after hour, feeling like you're not getting anything done.
I plan on coming back next year because it's a lot of fun and I like the experience of meeting new people.
I would come back for the people and the environment.
It's different because you learn at the same time as that you're having fun.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
There's no main thing that's the highlight. It's all one big highlight. It's like the highlight of my summer, pretty much.
It's definitely the most fun thing I'll ever do all summer.
When it comes to teaching students that are gifted and talented, they have access to the general education curriculum, and hopefully it's accelerated in some way. There are many options that allow students to move rapidly through the curriculum. This can include grade skipping, advanced placement courses, and ability groups such as honors sections. Each school is going to handle this differently. Make sure you can consult your text and think about, do you believe in grade skipping? Do you believe in advanced placement courses? A lot of times I see students that are coming to this college campus to take courses while they're in high school. There are a lot of social issues where they might not be prepared for. So they're going to need some, extra intervention. Check out your text and look at those concepts and see how you feel about them. Once again, students from diverse and urban areas may not participate in AP courses at the same rates when we're looking at students from culturally diverse backgrounds, because their schools' classes might not be as readily available. Many students decide not to participate because of peer pressure, and teachers of AP courses have had no special preparation in working with diverse or gifted students. Hopefully this is changing. We want to make sure all students with gifted or talentedness are encouraged and have a curriculum that's designed to meet their individual needs. So how can you make these instructional accommodations? Your text talks about differentiated instruction, enrichment programs, and database practices. And these are all opportunities for students to get an accelerated curriculum. We have things like magnet schools, separate classes, or even separate schools altogether. Make sure you investigate those. Find out, are those available within your school district? Of course, when it comes to technology, they can do virtual internet tours. They can take college courses now through distance learning opportunities, and a lot more tutorials on more advanced topics. This is an awesome way to go ahead and provide an individualized education for students that are gifted. Use the internet. There are plenty of videos out there, plenty of things that they can do to further explore their curiosity, to do some problem-based learning. And to set these up would be an excellent opportunity for any student. When it comes to transition times can be very, very stressful for these students. Longitudinal studies have shown that gifted students do not necessarily grow up to be highly successful adults. Unfortunately, many of them drop out of high school due to a boredom and a lack of challenge. Some universities are offering early entrance programs. University of Akron does the same thing. But once again, we wrap up with collaboration. If you have students with giftedness or talentedness in your class, you're going to have to work together with other educators to modify the curriculum and modify your instructional approach. And remember, a special attention should be paid to students with disabilities and students from diverse backgrounds to make sure they're encouraged to participate and they get the services they need. When it comes to families, parents often need professional help to help understand the unique challenges their child with giftedness is going to face. Realizing there might be underachievement due to boredom, due to lack of study or organizational skills, or lack of a challenge. Your parents are going to need to support it in this process. Parent involvement is going to be critical to the attitude about school. Help their child be a self-advocate. Help them, encourage that curiosity. And when it comes to our community, you can form mentorships, pair students with adults with an expertise in their area of interest. Around here, I'm sure there's many professionals at Goodyear, many scientists that would be more than willing to work with some of our students if they had a high interest in this particular area. Internships could be set up for students to gain experience in a particular career or a particular profession. This would definitely reduce that boredom and increase that level of challenge. So if you have these students in your class, please do all you can. This is an area that is constantly being cut because the attitude is, well, if they're gifted, they're going to learn everything they need to anyway. And that is a dangerous, dangerous attitude. We want to make sure our students are treated fairly. And if we remember from the beginning of the semester, fair means everyone gets what they need to be successful. Hope you've enjoyed these classes. Please make sure you come back and check out additional lectures on my YouTube channel. I can tell you it's going to be continually built over the next 2 years. I'm going to be focusing on areas for co-teaching, areas for educational implementation, accommodations, modifications across the curriculum and technology. Hope you've enjoyed my class and have a wonderful rest of the semester.